Good day, everyone. In our current chapter, we have learned about the importance of flight controller, which is the brain of the drone. We understood different flight controllers and the importance of selecting the correct flight controller, along with deciding the correct sensors for the drone. Today's lecture, I want to share some experiences regarding the flight controllers. I've always relied on the latest flight controllers since they are updated with the latest firmware and stability and sensor support. Using the version of the flight control, I have found out that it is very important because these flight controllers, the kind of flight logs, the flight data that I can highly depend on the kind of firmware and the version that I'm using. So if I want to study the flight logs after my drone flight, I have to make sure the latest flight controllers and firmware are available with the latest version of the software. Second thing, I would not heavily load the flight controller because the more I load the flight controller, there will be more delay in response by the flight controller. So when I say load, I don't need to attach too many sensors together or too many equipments together to the flight controller. I understand it is multi-purpose brain, but what I would do in such cases is that I would have more than one flight controller. So one flight controller can control the operations of the drone, whereas I can have the second flight controller talking to the first flight controller, which is controlling the sensors or which is controlling any other parts like the payloads or so. So your drone can have more than one flight controller, where each of these flight controllers have various purposes defined to them. And that always helps it because if you have too many things happening on a single flight controller, there are delays in response, or many times the drone will actually get an overload or a malfunction just because it has so much of things to do. It even though if it has the latest processors, there is still a delay or a lag that is introduced if there is too many things to do. Next thing is I would always watch out if there's a malfunctioning of the flight controller. So if there's data losses or if there is loss of power to the flight controller also, so I would always keep a watch out for that, because if a flight controller fails, your drone suddenly falls down. There is if it's like your brain, if the brain suddenly stops, it just collapses. So always make sure that your flight controller, if it's malfunctioning, you are always and always you have to make sure it is replaced immediately. Finally, I always mount my flight controller at the center of my drone. So the reason is I do not want to expose my flight controller to say on the top where is susceptible to say the dust or rainwater or so, or at the bottom where suddenly due to during the landing it might get affected. So I want to protect my flight controller as much as possible by mounting it in a place which is convenient for connecting to all the motors rather than having a huge wire mesh. And I would make sure that my flight controllers is well kept, is well insulated also, because that's the place. If it fails, it's going to suddenly break the drone. So I have to make sure my flight control is properly mounted and it's safe from any of the weather damages or any damages that might happen if the drone is landing also. So always and always keep your flight controllers safe, because I have seen many times that people randomly put the flight controllers anywhere on the drone. They're especially building the drone, and that has actually led to a lot of mishaps, especially when it is failing or if something happens to the flight controller when it's landing or so. So always make sure your flight controller is safe in all these experiences. Thank you very much.